so much for coming out tonight. Welcome to Books and Magic. My name is Amali, and I'm the events director here. We are so excited to have Pemi, Aguda, and Molly McGhee with us tonight to celebrate the launch of Pemi's debut short story collection, Ghostroots. Before we officially get started, I just have a few logistics to point out for how tonight's event is going to go. First up, we will be doing a hand-raised audience Q&A towards the end of the discussion, so please start thinking of questions to ask and hold on to them. After the talk, Pemi will be around to sign and personalize your books at the alcove next to where you checked in. We'll let you know where and when to start lining up for that. And lastly, if you're joining us virtually on the YouTube live stream, we would love to encourage you to buy a copy of Ghostroots online using the link in the live stream description. Okay, now let's get into this. In Ghostroots, Pemi brings us into a world of failing families, sinister magic, yearning lovers, childhood secrets. The range is so vast and so dynamic and so enticing. There's a lot to discuss in this collection, so I'm going to go ahead and introduce you to tonight's lovely authors. Pemi Aguda is an MFA graduate from the Helen Zell Writers Program at the University of Michigan. Her writing has been published in Granta, Plowshares, Zoetrope, and other publications, and has been awarded the O. Henry Prize for Short Fiction. She's from Lagos, Nigeria, and is currently living in Philadelphia. As I mentioned earlier, Molly McGhee joins Pemi in conversation tonight. Molly is from a cluster of unincorporated towns outside of Nashville, Tennessee. She completed her MFA in fiction at Columbia University, where in addition to receiving a Chair's Fellowship, she taught in the undergraduate creative writing department. She currently lives in Brooklyn and is the author of Jonathan Abernathy. You are kind. Okay, that is all for me. Without any further delay, please join me in giving Pemi and Molly a very warm welcome.
I'm excited.
I'm going to start with a pretty short reading. Thank you so much for being here. I've chosen to read from, I had something else chosen, but then in celebration of my friend Ify, who is graduating film school tomorrow, she has adapted Breast Milk to a short film, and I can't wait for you all to see it. But in celebration of that, I'm going to read from the middle of Breast Milk. What you need to know is that Aduke, the main character, is a new mother who is struggling to produce breast milk. Yeah. Okay. All our family members come out for the naming ceremony. Their voices ring loud as they celebrate Timmy, a first child, a son. Someone has dropped a thick white envelope into my lap. For my hard work, they say, I let the insulting thing slide off. Timmy strolls around in his Aguda made from the matching Guinea brocade his mother bought for us, a baby blue shade of sky we haven't seen since Harmattan started. He stops to laugh at someone's joke, the cloth billowing around him, so natural, so man, so Timmy. He has been cradling our baby all day as if eager to show off how modern he is, a rare Nigerian man who allowed his wife to keep her mother's name, a man who will be involved in the care of his child. I want to yank the baby from him, but I do not have the right. The one bond that ties mother to baby, at least for the first year, is missing. My breasts oppress me with their emptiness. We name him Fikayo. We call him Fi. Olu Fikayo. All the names I suggested were Finn, Fenton, Fran, because my love of F names had lingered from devouring all that angsty British literature when I was a teenager. But Timmy reminded me that we were Yoruba, not English, and the name should reflect that. Is there a Yoruba name for this child was conceived in the throes of hurt and anger? An Igbo name for this boy is a result of your forgiveness sex after your husband confessed his wrong? I acquiesced easily to his sensible arguments about the names, remembering how he had quietly rebutted my reservations about becoming his girlfriend 6 years ago, an elevation from a casual friend. Timmy's mother's pastor calls out the names Olufikayo, Olujimi, Olatunde. The people cheer and toast with glasses of wine and zobo under the canopy we rented for the day. When the road pastor dabs anointing oil on Fikayo's head, the baby begins to cry. I jump up to snatch him. He's hungry, I murmur to no one in particular, and retreat into the house. I hear music pick up behind me, Sunny Ade blasting from rented speakers, my cousin's children screaming at each other, Timmy's mother shouting for the caterer to start serving small chops. The woman's Christian benevolence is what prevents friction between her and my mother, between me and her, between her and Timmy. Love thy neighbor as thyself, she mutters to herself frequently, like a calming mantra, shrugging in acceptance even when she doesn't understand why her son is acting like a woman, doing household chores and sharing the financial decision making with me. The microphone screeches when I close the nursery door behind me, but the door is not thick enough to drown them out. One of my aunties has tied my earroll for me, insisting that the tighter the wrapper, the faster my pregnancy pouch will shrink. I release my belly now and flop down into the armchair. I shift Fee in my arms and draw the diaper bag closer with a foot. It is an awkward process. I haven't yet perfected the juggling act of motherhood. He quiets when the nib fills his mouth, and I am envious of a plastic bottle. My aunt finds me dozing off while Fee feeds. Feeding bottle care. Her gele is maroon and silver, and the light from the window reflects against the scaly material. I squint and look down at Fee. He has fallen asleep. Auntie, I say, but why? Why are you not breastfeeding? She crosses her arms under her own breasts. Dami's wife had the nerve to tell me she was not breastfeeding so her breast won't sag. Sag? You too, Aduke. Does your mother know about this decision? Auntie, I check to make sure Fee is still sleeping and lower my voice. There's no milk, Auntie. I have begun to cry. My aunt's face relaxes. She moves to pick Fee up, places him in his cot. She leans forward then, as if to hug me. I know what to do. Jumoke had the same problem, but you should see her now. The baby girl is 3 and we're begging her to stop. She reaches for my breasts, through the baby blue brocade, through my bra, and begins to knead. I feel myself leaving my body through a frustrated sigh, floating to the ceiling of the lilac nursery with the white silhouettes, above my own gele, above my auntie's gele, which dips forward in rhythm with her hands, above my body, above my shame.
You've written such a visceral short story collection that feels so cohesive, yet it's your first. I think you guys could probably see like my bodily reactions while she was reading that story, and I read that story for the first time on the subway, and I almost sort of fainted from feeling like deep empathy. No, I'm serious. Anyways, whatever, you guys don't need to know about me. I'm curious what your road to creating this collection was like.
Okay, the road.
The road, the journey.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I'm trying to map the road in my head. So the stories in this collection have started, I think, 8 years ago. The oldest story is Bird Woman, which was published, I think, in 2016. I think, if I'm right. That's a long time. I feel like I'm such a different person than I was when I was 26. But it's interesting. A lot of stories in this book have been published, published individually. But there's something else that happens when they're all together.
They change,
but also I start to see more clearly. It's one thing when you write one story and you're like, yeah, that was a fun thing. I know, like breast milk was inspired by my anthropology professor Ruth Behar at University of Michigan, who told this interesting story about going on the road and meeting this woman who said she couldn't breastfeed her children because there was anger in her breast milk and that they died. So that's one story, right? Yeah. But then when you layer all the stories on top of each other, I start to see all the things that I'm preoccupied by that consciously I was not aware of.
Well, that's what makes the collection feel so cohesive, is that there is resonance between each story, so that by the time you get to the end, your perception of the whole thing is changed. I'm curious if that came in the editing, in the placement of the stories, or how you sort of went about creating that feeling.
Ooh.
Ooh.
I love that you feel a feeling, Molly.
I feel a lot of feelings.
I think that it was just there.
Mm-hmm.
Like I am.
You are the embodiment, and as the artist,
Yes.
you channel that.
Yes, the stories resonate because I am in the middle of all of them.
I
Because
love
I
that.
created them. I think that's the truth. There wasn't that much editing after
Mm-hmm.
it was acquired.
Mm.
We did take out one story, but there wasn't that much editing. So any resonance that you see, I think, has always been there as opposed to fine tuning afterwards.
It's part of your voice and part of your artistic interest, your project.
Yes.
So what was your writing process like? Do you want to speak about that a little bit? I know it can be very private.
Again, because it's short story is very different from a novel. In a novel,
Very
it's
different.
like novel fog. I'm thinking of it. I'm dreaming it. I'm sleeping. I'm like, it's just this. What's that thing? Hologram?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, just over my whole world. But with stories, it feels like the process is different for each individual one. Some of them came to me from dreams.
Mm.
Ooh.
Pemi, did you know I like dreams?
Yes. Have you read Jonathan?
Don't do
Okay.
it.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll come back to it. But I wrote 24 Alaji William Street. Like almost, I woke up and I just wrote the whole thing like one day in the first draft anyway.
It feels like a fever dream.
I like that. I like that. Do you know Fever Dream is one of my favorite books?
Oh my god.
Okay.
Me too.
Now I've forgotten your original question.
Okay. Your writing process, was it different for each story? It sounds like it was.
It was different from each story. Some stories I think come from reading other things. Manifest, for example, I read a poem and I'm still trying to find the poem. So if this sounds familiar to any one of you, please tell me if you know this poem. But there was a line in the poem about exhausting cruelty to find yourself. So I was thinking about that, and I also went to Bread Loaf, where I took a crafts class with Samantha Hunt, and she gave us this exercise about apophenia.
Ooh.
Do you know? So apophenia, the concept of apophenia is that you can find connection with things that don't have any connection. So she gave us this exercise where she told us to make a list of things that we had just been thinking about, and then to talk through each point on the list to people around you. And through that talking, again, because you're the center of it, connections become apparent. So I had been thinking about that line from the poem. I had been thinking about like resemblance to my mother. I've been thinking about pimples. And so Manifest kind of came from all of that. So
This is the first story.
this is the first
Can
story.
you read the first line?
I remember it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna read it without looking at. But I just remember seeing Luis Alberto Urrea for the first time, and you know, like he gave his reading without looking at his book walls.
That's amazing.
Yeah, he just was like.
Like, sir.
Anyway, the first sentence, and I'm not gonna look. Of Manifest is. This is the first pimple of your life.
I love the way you weave. I have two questions that I can go to from what you just said. So the first one is I want to talk about your mentors and inspiration, because you've had some really amazing mentors. But don't answer that one yet. You have it in the back of your head. First, we're going to talk about sort of the body horror and gender horror within these stories. I'm curious if it was a heavy thing for you to carry in the process of writing it, and how you, I'm going to say something a little cheesy, how you had the bravery to be so honest on the page about a lot of those relationships.
That's a good questions.
Oh, should we switch them?
No, I don't think we necessarily come to the page feeling like I am brave, right? We're not really thinking about bravery that way. It's just like you write the thing, and then it's done, and then somebody else is like, "Ooh, how brave!" So
It's just so honest, and it feels so. Reading them feels so true, and so for me to capture a truth like that without turning away from it or shying away from the complexity of it or the nuance of it feels like bravery.
I'm glad you feel that way. Thank you.
Yeah.
That feels like a compliment. But the answer is I don't know. I just they're these stories, and I wrote them, and then it's interesting because there's so many things people tell me after they've read my work that are not apparent to me until they say it. So sometimes it feels like this mysterious thing that's happening. I know we're not supposed to mystify the writing process, but truly,
if it is, then that's okay. You're being honest about it.
yeah, like truly, a lot of times it does feel mysterious, like sitting down and like this whole thing comes out, and I'm feeling things, and I'm like, where is this coming from? And then it's over, and then somebody's like, wow.
They're like, you did that, and you're like, I did. I'm curious if you see yourself as like a capital A artist, because it sounds like your artistic process is very inspiration driven, very based in sort of the world as you observe it and then interpret it.
Nobody has ever asked me this question. It's interesting. Now I'm having like a crisis of self.
And it's being live streamed.
It's been my mom. What is an artist?
You know what? I went to college to figure that out. No answer still.
There you go.
What is art? One could ask.
I don't know. I think
Stories feel like the stories of an artist to me.
okay.
Sorry.
Well, but isn't every writer an artist?
I think every writer feels differently. Some describe themselves as craftsmen, right? Some describe themselves as writers. Some describe themselves as novelists. I'm curious, when you think of yourself, do you ascribe a label?
The true answer is no.
That's beautiful.
The true answer is no. But if artists feel the way I do, just like walking, I'm going to be earnest now, but just like feeling everything just like so deeply.
Yes. I
And
can really tell in your stories that you feel the world deeply. Sorry, don't look at me. I'll cry if you cry. Shut up.
So if that's what makes art, if that's what makes a person an artist, then maybe yes.
Maybe yes. Well, now I'm going to go back to my earlier question. You've had the privilege of studying with some beautiful artists, some writers who I personally really admire. Can you speak a little bit about their influence on your work?
Are you thinking of Edwidge?
Oh, I'm thinking of lots of people.
I started with Edwidge Dantiga at the Miami Book Fair Fellowship in 2020, I think it was. She's amazing. She's one of those people who you sit down and talk to her and you kind of forget how she's a fucking big deal. And then I'm like, wow, Edwidge is just here kicking with me. She came to the Davidson Ball like that week, and she was just like hanging out with me and Ify and Uchi, and I was like, she's so cool. But it's interesting. I read Crick Crack when I was a teenager in Lagos, Nigeria, and she came to my program when I was at the MFA. She came to the program, and I had the honor of introducing her. And so for that, I read Crick Crack again.
Will you remind our new viewers which MFA program you went to?
Oh, University of Michigan.
Okay, so while you were there studying, I think the Helen Zell's writer program is cool.
It's
so
very cool.
okay,
Yeah.
whatever. But while you were studying there, that's when you got to work with Edwidge.
Well, it's when I met her for the first time, and I got to introduce her. And while prepping for that introduction, I got to read Crick Crack again.
Ooh.
And it was interesting reading it like 10 years later, because I was like, oh, she is a bigger influence than I thought. There's like a lot about like family and like daughterhood and motherhood that just like really resonated like in. So now I'm like, there's just so many other people that might not be at the fore of my mind, but who are just like these spirits who have like
really sort of guided
mentored me.
you,
Yeah.
helped
Yeah.
you to find your talent, helped you to connect with your voice. I'm curious if you would be open to talking about the exploration of motherhood and daughters in the book. Would you be open to speaking? I want to leave that question open because when you read the book, you get this visceral feeling that that is a deeply important relationship, and a very complex one throughout the text. So I don't want to put any of my own sort of boundaries around it. I want to leave it up to you.
The freedom is scary.
I'm sorry.
Motherhood, daughterhood. I'm a daughter.
You are.
I am, yes. I love my mom.
Thanks for creating you.
Thanks for creating me. Thanks, Mom. I was just talking to my friend earlier about this, about how again, your preoccupations might not be clear until time has passed.
Right.
And so I didn't realize I just had so much mother-daughter stuff going on until...
It's an important relationship in your life.
Yes.
And so you've thought a lot about it.
I have.
And that has maybe shaped how you view other relationships? Wait, let me throw another few sips in for a second. Let me rephrase. Family debt in the book is a big theme. You're looking at me like, why did I invite you to talk with me on stage?
This is great. This is therapy.
Do you, like in one of the stories, you mentioned Manifest, where the daughter takes on the face of her mother's mother. And then must then navigate not only her mother's relationship with her, but her mother's relationship with her own mom.
Yeah.
And that sort of tripling is present both in the sort of like familial stuff on the female side, the matriarchal side, but it's also there in the inverse when mothers are interacting with their sons. And I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about that.
Yeah. So again, to go back to start with Manifest, I guess. At some point, I think in my early 20s, especially around the time when I was like, I want to be an individual. I was watching my mom a lot, watching my mom and her mom, and watching my mom do things or say things that perhaps she would not have accepted from me, you know? So it's always interesting to
from the mouths of babes.
Yeah, to be in that room and watch your mother be a daughter, right?
Yes, yeah.
And so I was thinking about all the ways that I had started to embody my mother's behaviors. And that's for somebody who was like, no, I'm going to be my own person. That can be jarring.
Scary.
That can be, yeah. And I don't know too much about like family history beyond a certain point. And so I started to wonder, like, what are the other things that I can't see
that are influencing or shaping the way you exist?
Yeah, because then the idea of being an individual is just like it's a joke. It's it's not real because
that's terrifying.
Yeah, I was just reading an interview with Katja Apekeda, and she was talking about how even if there are no ghosts in the room, that we're all epigenetically haunted. And
I love that.
That's kind of motherhood, daughterhood. It's like, what is you? What is just an echo of everybody else who's come before you? And I really, honestly, struggle with that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge struggle. And just, I mean, the title captures that so well, that is really at the core. That question and that searching is at the core of the book, and you feel that power throughout as you're reading it. I'm curious how you decided to, like, did you know that hauntings and superstition was something, you spoke a lot about being surprised by the writing as a collection. Did you know that was something you were interested in before? Was that one visible to you?
Yes, absolutely, because that's what I enjoy reading. I enjoy reading like stories of hauntings, but not like hauntings necessarily in the typical way.
Right.
Because like when we think hauntings, I know we just think ghosts, but there are like so many other ways that we can be haunted. I teach this story by Diane Cook a lot.
Love her.
What's it called? It's called Flotsam.
Oh.
Do you know that one?
I was thinking of the one about babies.
It's kind of about babies too.
Okay.
But it's like about babies without being about babies. It's like a woman who keeps finding baby clothes in her dryer every time she goes to, she puts her clothes in the dryer, and then when she brings them out, they're like tiny baby clothes. And it's like a very short story. It's only 5 pages, but that is a haunting.
It is, yeah.
And so like, what isn't a haunted story? So I have always been interested in that way, and just like how, especially since I'm interested in speculative fiction, just how repressed things can resurface in ways that we don't expect. Yeah.
When we chatted a little bit before this, you described your work as light speculative, Lite, and I was thinking, in a way, it's almost spiritually speculative as well, because it is really ancestrally speculative. Like the engine of all of the stories have to do with where we come from and how we can and can't shape that. It makes for kind of a spooky read, where by the end you're like, oh shit.
You've coined some really nice terms. Like, ancestral speculation. What was the other one?
I don't know.
Spiritual speculation.
I'm just talking.
I'm gonna go around being like, I'm spiritually speculating.
Please. I'm curious if you have a favorite story in this collection.
No. Yes. I mean,
Expound.
I love all my stories equally. How dare you? But I feel kind of warmly, I think, towards The Wonders of the World.
Oh, that one is it's so beautiful. Will you tell us a little bit about what it's about? And folks, this is when you start formulating your questions in the back of your mind.
The Wonders of the World is about a young girl, Abisola. She's in secondary school, so that's maybe high school here. And she's gone on a field trip to Ikogosi, which is one of these natural wonders of the world in Nigeria. And she's a kind of a depressed little girl, and
I can relate to that.
And she meets, and one of the new boys in her class is this kind of strange being who doesn't conform to like typical masculine
expectations. One of the beautiful images is when she's looking into the water and sees his green toenails.
Yes. And so she believes him supernatural. He believes himself, so he calls himself a prophet. And so on this trip, she hopes that he can take away some of the heaviness that she feels.
And that heaviness, I love that in the story that heaviness goes unnamed, because she herself did not name it.
Yes.
It's really beautiful. I'm curious how you reached the ending of that story.
That one was hard.
Yeah.
That one was hard. But I think for that story, when I was 13, I'm going to make it personal. When I was 13,
Please do.
Was a sad little girl, and I would go to school every day, and every time I just walked into the halls, it just felt like there was this like oppression for me, and I just didn't know how to deal. And one day I went home, and I tied it to the school. I was like, it is this school that's causing this thing to me. And so I went home, and I told my parents. I knelt down in front of them, and I was like, please change my school. And my parents weren't very like wealthy. They were already like struggling to afford this one. And you know what? Like they were like, okay.
I love that.
And I think in a collection where there are like so many fraught familiar relationships, I'm like so glad that Wonders of the World is in here, because the parents are just like
they just like are full of love.
Yeah. Like, and it's not ambiguous at all.
No.
And I kind of wanted that represented in the book.
I really love that, and that's really beautiful. And you can sort of feel that in this story. And now I'm going to respond to the personal thing that you said, but thank God that happened because it clearly allowed you to keep that artistic and deep feeling side of you from having to be conformed to the school that you were at, which I think is really rare. So I'm personally very glad that your parents made the decision.
Good job, Agudas.
Should we come to audience questions? Yes. Does anyone have any questions? And I'll repeat what you say so that our folks on the live stream can hear us. Who will be the brave one to go first? Cowards.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Hi, Pemi. Congratulations. I'm so happy for you. So you mentioned working on the book for 8 years, which is a long ass time. I'm curious to know, like, what outside of writing sustained you? Like other activities outside of writing, from one writer to another.
So the question was that Pemi's worked on this collection for 8 years, and folks in the audience were curious what sustained you while you were writing, outside of the writing itself.
Friendships like yours, which sounds cheesy and like coy, but it's true. Like I
Sometimes
truly,
life is cheesy.
okay, stop saying that. But it's true that I feel just really inspired by my friendships, and I feel lucky to know so many like writers and artists, and just like random conversations bring up so much. And so my friendships, just reading, just being in the world, traveling. I've been lucky to like have done some traveling, like for residencies and things like that, meeting new people in strange places, just being jarred over and over and over again, just like in my body. You know that that feeling when you enter a space that you haven't been before, or you travel and you feel like dislocated, like your body hasn't caught up to you. Like to have that happen again and again and again, I think truly adds to like the way I see the world, the way I enjoy the world. It's because it feels like an enjoyment. Yeah.
I love that. Does anyone else have any questions? We're making eye contact. Okay.
Yeah. I have so many, and I feel like a lot of what I want to say is going to start off like commentary first, which I feel like I could share with you privately, but I think it's healthy and necessary to love publicly as well.
Aww.
So I just want to say that a lot has been said about the resonance between the stories, and I've read some of them individually, and it's true they are speaking to each other. And it's interesting that you used the word bravery earlier, because when reading the stories, was feeling this like sense like clear-sightedness, and then also just like such a sharp perception of like human condition, and just being able to like connect the dots. And something that came forward was like ancestral haunting, but then also over and over again this need, this wanting to be unburdened and free of the physical body. And I was like, I just wonder if you could share more about your thoughts about like this body as a vessel of like navigating the world, and I'm also just curious for you personally, like what helps you feel lighter in your own body as you move through the world. And I have another question. And I love that you asked the question about your favorite story. I'm also curious about which story you feel like stretched you as a writer and like really challenged your process, given that you started, your first story was like really early. And
So there were 3 questions, I think. Yes? Okay. The last question was, what was the story that stretched you the most? But the other 2 questions were, can you remind me? They were about...
Something about burdens?
Yeah, it was in a moment. I can't really
So many of the stories are about bodies as vessels and being able to transcend the body itself and unburdening yourself with the physical. And can you speak a little bit about that? And is there anything that you do personally that makes you feel light in your own body?
I'll do the simple one first, which is the story that I think stretched me the most. I think the answer is The Hollow.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's right. I think it was the hollow. The first iteration was very different from what it is now, and I think that was a story that taught me patience. Just had to keep going back to it. Had to give it space. Had to keep coming back to it. Even in editing, right? Even in editing, Renee gave me lots of feedback, and she was like, "It's just not there yet. It's not there yet." So I think that was a story that has most drastically changed from its first draft, but also like taught me a lot about like pacing and structure. And this was the first time I had worked with multiple timelines, I think, in a story, and so that in itself was doing something new for me. As for boardings, that's just, I don't know how to answer that question. I think that being a young woman in Nigeria, I think the one time I've had like so I'm not a very, I don't yell at people, the one time that I've had, like, I ranted in a way that almost made me like cry was when a relative was telling me to change my hair, when I still had hair, was telling me that my hair was like too big, and it was just a random day. I'd come back from work, I'd been in Lagos, I took public transport home, I was exhausted, like people on the streets are being wild, my boss was being wild, and I came home to a space that I thought was home, and
Safe,
and this person is like, "Your hair is too big. Why is that too?" And I just went off, and I was like, "How dare you? Do you know how hard it is being a woman?" And like, I probably sounded a little bit like that.
But it was from the heart.
Yeah, like that monologue in Barbie. But I just kept going. I was like, "It's not fair, it's not fair, it's not fair." And like, that's what just kept ringing. Like, it's not fair. And it's true. It's like, you know, so somebody else had told me once that his skirt was too long. The same day she told me, no, that skirt was too short. She's like, it has to be the right length. So it's not like you're hiding something, but also not that you're revealing too much. And it's like all of this, it's just so insidious, and it's just there, and it's like everybody's like, do this or do that, or be this way, or hold yourself that way. And as somebody who wanted to make like people proud and happy, I just kept, and you don't realize how much you're holding, like hunching over, you're just holding. And so I didn't even know that this was a thing in my work until I'd seen several stories back. So I'm like, wow, this women really want to let go of their buddies. I wonder why, you know? Yeah, Ify, I don't know. How do I feel lighter?
Yeah, do you think your lack of hair now makes you feel lighter?
Oh, Molly. Molly with the therapy. Oh boy.
Should I switch careers?
I mean, that does make me feel lighter. I don't know. Just like talking to people, like letting go, letting it out as opposed to like holding it in, I think is the most important thing. Thanks for that question.
I think we have time for one or two more. 3, yeah.
Hi, Pemi. Congratulations. I'm so excited. I remember the first time that, okay, I'm taking the cue from what the audience said about like public display of, what's the word? Praise, yeah. And I remember when I read Breast Milk for the first time, it was like a digital copy, sorry, you know, paywall and everything, but I read the digital copy, and I remember like just like having a feeling of wanting to eat the story, and like I remember like also just like messaging you like, this story is so, there's something visceral, as a word doesn't quite like capture like the feeling of just wanting to eat the story. But I would say maybe sensuous could be like it just felt very alive. And I'm glad now that it has a physical copy, so I can like blend it in the smoothie and actually use it. But
Please don't do that.
And that's the question.
But I think there's also something about the way you write, even though you don't like see yourself as an artist. There is a certain like craft to the work that you like, the stories and like just the experience of as a reader, like reading that. And the question I had was about your editing process, and how you negotiate that editing process. First, as someone who writes from a culturally specific place, how have you negotiated, like, okay, I want the story to be clear, I want the story to be open, but you know, there are some idiosyncrasies that you might want to like know or protect over like certain things that like that you just feel protective about. So I'm just thinking like craft wise, how you've negotiated with editing, whether with friends, your cohorts, or like editors who you've worked with.
So the question was that your stories have such a beautiful life to them that they almost feel embodied and maybe like you want to eat them. Yes. Yum. But how did you manage to pull that off while also remaining sensitive to the sort of cultural nuances that you were trying to depict?
Good job. Thank you, Kita. Yeah, this event has been good for my ego. I think for me it's important that I am not betraying Nigerians.
Ooh.
Say it louder, say it again.
And so I think the way that I navigate that is making sure that my first readers are Nigerians. So after I write a story, I send it to my friends who are Nigerians, and I'm like, if there's any point where it feels like I'm starting to explain things to Nigerians, show me now. And then over time, I think working with editors, if there's something that they're like, oh, we don't understand. There are things I've had to fight for to stay, you know. But also I've learned to also ask myself, what is ego and what is the truth? Like, if something doesn't need to be there, if it doesn't change the sense of the story, then maybe I could take it out or make it clearer. So it's just finding the right dial on that spectrum between, no, this is here because it needs to, like, this Nigerian word or this Nigerian phrase needs to be here, versus, you know, it's atmosphere. I don't know, it's a spectrum, and I just have to play with the dial. But over time, I've fought for things that have stayed, and I've also let go of things that I don't like. When I asked myself the hard questions, it didn't really need to be there. Yeah, thank you.
Any more questions? Yeah?
Is it me?
Yeah.
So I was wondering, Pemi, what do you feel are the differences for you of working in the different forms of, so you finished your stories, and I know you're now working on your novel, and do you feel that, does the short story form offer you anything you can do that is harder in a novel, or are you finding a freedom in the novel form? Just wondered if there was anything to say about that.
Wait, let me repeat the question.
Probably a lot.
You think about it for a second. We're taking a breath together. Writing. Beautiful. Okay, so, Pemi, you're working on a novel? Oh my god. Is there a difference or a freedom of the form that you feel in working on the novel versus working on short stories? And how do you as a writer sort of conceptualize those differences?
Okay, Anna. Novels are so hard. I don't know. How did you do it, Molly? How did you do it? I don't know. Novels are so hard. I think my brain is too small.
No, we're not going there.
No, I'm not trying to be
Should we all like compliment you some more?
No. Okay, what I mean is that to hold a novel in my head is hard. There's just so many things happening at once. There's so much space. Whereas a short story feels specific. It feels pointed. I know in 15 to 20 pages it will be over, and I would have said what I'm saying. But with a novel, by page 50, I'm like, oh, did I drop that? Do I need to go back and pick it up? Where there's just so much space, and it's that said, I do love the way that a novel takes over my life. I quite enjoy it. It just I call it novel fog. I think everybody calls it novel fog. That novel fog when you're just eating, breathing, everything is seen through the prism of that novel. I kind of enjoy being overwhelmed that way by the work. It doesn't feel as sustained in a short story. That feeling. Yeah.
It's immersive.
Yes. Concise, yeah.
Do we have any more questions? Yes.
I'm thinking Bird Woman and contributions, and the question is, how do you decide who gets to be free?
That is a really good question. A big one. So the asker referenced Bird Woman and contributions and asked Pemi, how do you decide who gets to be free?
I don't decide. I'm a god. Wow, that's an interesting question. I think I have to sit with that one.
Yeah.
But I think in those two stories, so for those who don't know, Bird Woman is a story about a woman who turns into a bird. And contributions, I can't talk about contributions without spoiling it, can I?
I don't know. I think
Do you wanna?
I think you can.
Contributions is
Throw a couple keywords out.
about a group of women.
Yes. Who are part of a collective.
They're part of a collective. It's a money collective, and they contribute money, and then
They
at some point,
try to take care of each other,
Yes,
though they meet someone who challenges them.
yes, and then the contributions change. But I like to think that in those two stories, the main women taste freedom, even if they don't.
Who stays free? I think so. I don't know if that was the question, but that was the question I wanted to ask.
Who stays free?
Yeah.
Well, that's a different question.
Who gets and stays free?
Who stays free? It's not. I don't decide. That's how the stories come to me.
Really wonderful question, because both stories are meditations on how we collectively and individually can carry freedom, and then the way those freedoms can actually harm us if we don't anticipate sort of the nuances that come with it.
Yeah. What if other people don't want us to be free?
Yeah. Damn, if I had a gold star. Okay, do we have any more questions? Maybe one final. Ooh, do I see you? Yeah, you're like, let's do it again. Okay. Thank you, Pemi, so much for sharing your beautiful work and for putting it out in the world and for having this wonderful conversation. Can we all give it up for Pemi?
Thank you all so much for coming out. Thank you to everyone who asked questions. Thank you to Molly for moderating such a great conversation. And thank you to Pemi for doing this along with us. This book is truly so good, and this conversation just makes me want to go home and reread it immediately. So if you haven't gotten a copy yet, I highly recommend you do so. We have plenty of additional books available for purchase at the table where you checked in. If you're still with us on the live stream, you can buy a copy by clicking the link in the live stream description. We also have some copies of Molly's novel, Jonathan Abernathy, You Are Kind, which is also fantastic. Both of these books have just stayed in my brain months after reading them, and I read a lot of books, so that really says something. As I mentioned earlier, Pemi will be around to sign and personalize your books. That's going to be happening where my coworker Isabella is now pointing to. Thank you, Isabella. We're going to ask that you all line up down the center aisle, curve around to the wall, and please make sure you grab all of your personal belongings with you so we can start to break down and rearrange the space. Okay, that is all. Let's give these two one last round of applause. Thank you guys so much.